All right, it's me again. Okay. Okay, so we're going to have a fireside chat with Gabby. It's my great honor and pleasure to sort of have a chat and be the moderator. In fact, a little side story. We've known each other, gosh, pre-Web3 days, right? I think back in the days when sort of, game outsourcing work in
That's right.
Yeah, exactly. So, and then of course, we came back together in a big way during the sort of first Web3, I guess, or blockchain gaming era. Sandbox, Axie Infinity, YGG, of course, right? But maybe for the audience, if you can give a quick introduction to what you're up to today, and I talked about agents, but we just cover all sorts of topics. Maybe you can kick us off.
Thanks, Yat. Okay, so I'll go on a quick journey of where we've been. So my name is Gabby, and I've been a founder in the gaming space generally for over 20 years. So started with a mobile game company in the 2010s. Discovered CryptoKitties, which Yat talked about, Axie Infinity, 2018. Because of that, I founded YGG in 2020, and YGG was founded because of the communities in the Philippines that were able to find a lot of value around Web3 crypto, NFTs, and Web3 gaming specifically. So we organized a lot of these communities, and that became very popular in 2021. It's been a journey seeing Web3 gaming rise and fall and just pivot to find its PMF in the last few years. And last year, we opened our crypto-native publishing portal called YGG Play. So YGG Play is both a publisher of Web3 native games. We call them casual degen games. And then we have a discovery portal and a launchpad. So that's been going fine. But now we're seeing another shift. I think everyone in tech, not just in Web3, is being affected by what's happening in AI. And we're no different than that. And specifically in games, you've seen that on the top end, there's been a lot of layoffs, a lot of big companies getting smaller, medium-sized companies shutting down. It's the same in Web3. But where the innovation is and where a lot of interesting stuff that's happening is what they call vibe-coded games, right? So a lot of people are vibe coding. You might be using just Claude directly. You might be using something like Rosebud or Verse to create your games. And in the indie scene, where might be literally just one developer, very small teams, unconstrained by like the constraints of if you're an indie team, they don't want you using AI in your games. The fans are very strict about that. None of those constraints are happening in indie. And so we see a lot of explosion and innovation happening on the indie side, on the vibe coding side. So we're kind of transforming ourselves to be the discovery portal for vibe-coded games and then helping these creators, which has always been what YGG has been doing. We want to help creators. We want to help people look for ways to make money using Web3, and we're using that to kind of position it for vibe-coded content.
No, that's great. I don't. How many people here actually have vibe coded? Just to get an idea. Yeah, right. So it's super easy. You literally just chat to the agent. But on that comment though, I was in a talk with Peter Steinberger, and he hates the term vibe coding. He prefers to call it agentic engineering. But I think the reason why he had a comment around that is because vibe coding is it's fun, and I think it's very apropos for games. But there's something interesting when you talk about agentic engineering, where it's really the orchestration, right? Where how you kind of all put it together. We talked about it backstage, but it feels to me like you're kind of building like the congregate, and maybe it'd be good for the audience to understand where that is. And I think also, are we, on that topic, are we at the Flash era of vibe coding?
That's a great question.
Or are we already past that?
Yeah, if you remember 15 years ago when a lot of people started creating casual games because of Flash, and then there's sites at Congregate that came about it. I think that actually is a kind of very good analogy to what's happening now. Except now with libraries that we have, 3JS, Phaser, you can make actually somewhat complex games. I actually don't do a lot of quote-unquote agentic engineering myself because I'm doing a lot of back and forth prototyping with Claude, which I find fun. So it's not like Claude, make me a game, make it fun, make no mistakes. Like that doesn't work, right? So, but trying to figure out the mechanics and then I actually have Claude kind of run my game design past Ralph Koster's design principles, and then come in to see, okay, where is this fun, not fun, and then building the whole GDD, and then running Monte Carlo simulations on top of it. So I'm actually having fun kind of doing that manually, and that took. I prefer doing that to like creating a whole OpenClaw setup for myself, automating my own life.
Yeah, and I don't think you need a whole OpenClaw setup for that. But one of the things that people do, I think someone on Animoca Minds built an entire game studio, and he then launched it as a skill. And kind of when you're building these Monte Carlo scenarios, one of the very cool things is that eventually you might be able to build a skill that would be, Gabby's way of doing games or something, right? And I think this is really interesting where all of the sort of player communities around the world actually may be able to create their versions of, adaptations of games. And one of the fastest growth areas in games has been modding, right? And so how do you see the modding space develop and sort of grow? And also, do you think there's a risk that, when Roblox, Minecraft is a different beast, but Roblox is going to start using AI for sure, right?
For sure, 100%.
And they're going to basically, where do you think that's going to go? Because in a way, there is a really, I think, big opportunity, especially with like Node and 3GS and so on, that you could actually make gaming decentralized again, right? But if Roblox kind of gets all of the sort of doesn't open up, which is unlikely that they'll do, and they introduce AI there, where do you think that challenge will be? And do you think it's a threat, or do you think it's just such a different audience anyway?
No, it's a great question. I would say that Roblox is the only real quote-unquote metaverse virtual world that's worked at scale, right? And a lot of people in the last 5-6 years have spent a lot of time saying, we're the next Roblox, we're better because we're decentralized, we don't take as much of a cut on the earnings and all of that.
Which is 70%.
And none of that has seemed to matter because Roblox is still the only one at scale. What's interesting about what's happening now, and because of vibe coding, you're talking to it usually like it's Claude at the back end, no matter what you're using, or it's ChatGPT, but they prefer web-based frameworks. So the interesting thing is the default of most people making these content now is not using Unity or Unreal or even a good old. The default is becoming 3JS, it's becoming Phaser. So the web HTML5 technology has threatened to be the next big thing in games for the last 15 years. It's never worked because I think probably because of the discovery and because the kind of app store format has been very dominant. But now that everyone wants to create something using these LLMs, and the LLMs prefer the open web, I think we're seeing a real shot at having a real kind of open web again.
I mean, I think it's exciting, right? Because one of the reasons why coding agents are so powerful is because of GitHub, right? You've got all of the training and learning models, and so they get better and better and better. And now they've got all the training models, and they can code often better than the human. The human may still have to be involved, but the AI agent can just do this so much better. And I think maybe the opportunity for, let's call it Roblox, which is Lua based, right? The thing about Roblox is that the code isn't open source. So an AI agent can't learn from it externally, right? And but you have a lot more people creating it. So what do you think, like Minecraft might have a better shot? Because Minecraft is kind of quasi open source in some ways, right? And that's one question. And then the second one is, I think how do we get, because in order for 3JS to get so much better, we need more people to work on 3JS, we need more models, we need more GitHub repositories with open game models. Right now they're still limited. Like, how would you get to that point? How do we get more developers to really embrace 3JS?
One of the really interesting things I'm seeing with, for example, Rosebud or Remix is that it's basically one button to fork a game, right? And so if I like a game template, because kind of these communities are more open source by nature, it's basically like fork this and then get all of the source, and then I can now like work upon it and then build on top of it. So that's a very powerful primitive that doesn't really exist in kind of the closed source kind of models. The other question I would have is that in our mental frame of what the metaverse is it a persistent 3D world where people are going about where people think Roblox is or Minecraft is? Or is it more like, yeah, the agentic web with millions of different destinations where I can do something, have a game, or have my agents dealing with other agents, other properties. So I'm still not convinced that the kind of snow-crashed version of the metaverse is really what the metaverse is.
I agree with
right?
that. Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I think it's something you can latch onto because visually it's appealing. But you know, the metaverse, I agree with you, is not that at all. But one of the things that like with open source code, you had a lot of people publish this stuff. I find and we're investors in Rosebud, so I find that a lot of the Rosebud games that are being built are not on GitHub, right? So I mean, does it mean that maybe Rosebud, we should talk to Rosebud and say, hey, you know what, you need to be, your game
Default open?
default open or something, because it's part of that evolution, right? How to get better games, we need AI to see that. But of course, it also means that in a way you could also say that erodes their moat, because then if Claude can write a game just as good as Rosebud because it has basically all the open libraries, right? So there's an interesting sort of friction between that. But without that, I don't think we'll get enough growth in that area.
Yeah, it's kind of a hard business conundrum, I would say, is that like where is your moat, especially now that content is essentially free, right? And where people have landed is that your moat might be in network effects, which is very hard to make and even harder to defend because network effects can move. You have intellectual property, and then you have distribution and community, right? Of course, YGG being on the community side from day one, this is really kind of where we're trying to kind of build our moat towards distribution and community. But with also the positioning that we're doing with YGG Play, it's knowing that content will be infinite. Most of this content is not going to be commercially worth anything. You can't expect these vibe-coded content to have really good, maybe like payments, for example, or like good economies that you can kind of run monetization off of. So I think this is where we'll be differentiating ourselves. If these people want to make money professionally, then we'll have the smart contract payments, for example. We'll be building like community-based hubs for people to promote the games that they're interested in. And I think that's our kind of little corner of the metaverse that we'll be working on.
It could be a really big corner, right? And the question, I guess, is, do you think, and certainly that was the vision of the Rosebuds and Verse 8s of the world, which is, does everyone become a game maker? Does everyone want to become a game maker? I mean, one thing we do know is that everyone's going to be a programmer or coder of some form, whether they like it or not. And I think there's a prediction that 90% of all apps are going to go away, right? And the prediction around that is because people are no longer going to be, it's not going to be one big app that you're using. It's going to be millions of little apps that you're using that are games for your friends, that are adaptations, or forks, for instance, that are just as good. But games have these network effects, though, right? They're more fun when there's more people attached to them, right? So how do you see that in the future? Do you think is it a classic game model? We'll have 1 million games vibe coded, and then there's going to be a few of them that just become really, really big, or do you think it's going to just fundamentally shift the way gaming distribution should be considered?
Yeah, no, that's a very good question. I do think that there will still be hits, but I think that having software that is essentially almost ephemeral that I can just create for me and my friends means that like the long tail will get even longer. Where I think this really changes the game industry is on the high end, the top end, the AAA, which kind of starting to collapse under its own weight, right? So we've seen most of the layoffs happen in AAA, a lot of the big studios, for example. And after the recent layoffs at Epic Games, I saw something which made me laugh. It was like the most secure job right now is the indie developer. And that's funny because if you're an indie, your job is never secure, right? But as a small team, a solo person, you're always facing the headwinds of where the market is and trying to create a product or a game that can adapt to that. And if you're working in, as a character animator inside of Fortnite, you don't really know what the market wants. You know that you need to make this little character move as part of the larger package that is Fortnite, but you actually don't know. You're shielded from what the market forces are. So I think with costs coming down, a lot of more content coming out, everyone is trying to be their own entrepreneur. Everyone's trying to face market forces head on and see, can I actually make something that people would want to buy, whether the one buying on the other end is human or agent, as long as value is being made. So I think that is kind of the big trend that's happening now.
So, I mean, let's shift gears a little, because talking about sort of the gaming industry as a whole, game makers, to your point you just mentioned, could feel threatened by what's going on. Ironically, it's the engineers and programmers that are most at risk relative to what it was before, right? And we can talk about the future of jobs a little bit later. But there's an interesting sort of scenario where there's movements like, this is definitely no AI. What do you think will be the most valuable qualities for a game in the future when every game can be made by an AI?
Wow, that's a big question. I think
we're all about big questions right now. So.
Yeah, so on at least the side that we're seeing, being able to rally your own community around the game, I think is very important. And we saw this all the way with Axie 5-6 years ago. When Axie came out, a lot of professional game developers essentially discounted it because it was, quote unquote, not a real game, or it didn't look like a AAA game.
What they said about mobile as well back in 2009. Yeah.
And what was real was the community that built around it, that created a wave that started in the Philippines, moved towards the rest of the world. And I think the kind of the truth that that Axie moment, and at one point they were doing billions of dollars in transaction volume in a year, right? So I think that truth that you can rally community around a game, it doesn't need to have NFTs. I think that's kind of a core truth, and those are the kind of primitives that we're playing with now, where, okay, there's going to be a lot of vibe-coded games, a lot of your community that will be your players are also your creators. So actually, you're starting to kind of mix the actions that they're playing with your community. What will make a game viable in terms of financial viability or making it sticky via community? Those are the things that we're starting to explore.
I mean, one of the things that I find exciting about the gaming space is that what was difficult for indie developers is the cost of a game was still too prohibitive to try a new kind of game, like an experimental game, a new direction. And now with the cost of vibe coding being so, like for instance, the team, one of our portfolio projects, Anichess, right? Actually, which YGG was also involved in, right? Basically, they launched this game called sort of King's Gambit, which was basically a mobile game, and they built it in 2 weeks, right?
Amazing.
Right, and they built it in 2 weeks. It wasn't to make a lot of money. It was to bring attention to Anichess, and it was attention to sort of the project, and to kind of the battle chess that they built. But they were able to create an engaging experience for communities. And so this was actually not a game that was intended to make money as much, but it was a game that could engage community in and of itself, right? And if you might remember, there was this thing, failed experiment at the time, but they called it advergaming, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, right?
It was a terrible time.
Exactly, right? Again, we're dating ourselves here. But the whole idea of advergaming was that, you can basically create a game for the community of the corporates, right? But the problem was that because the cost of a game was expensive and running it, and it just didn't make sense as a marketing expense, right? But when you can basically vibe code a game for 50 to 100K or less even, or whatever it is that you're doing.
Yeah, the ephemeral game. Yeah.
Exactly, the ephemeral game, but it's engaging with the community. It's kind of like what Flash was, right?
That's right.
Right? Do you think we will see a renaissance of gaming coming in for indie developers because all the corporates are like, let's gamify, or you think that's just too far away?
Oh, I think there's just gonna be an explosion of content, and I like the Anichess example because you have IP, you have community, but now the number of games or the amount of content you can build around that is essentially infinite, right? So I think it's kind of changing the frame of like what a game is or what it serves. It's always been around kind of the content itself, right? But now that the content can change pretty much anytime and it's very low cost to do so, it might be that your core is the community and then what the content is around it is the one that changes.
So there's a lot of tools out there. How do you think, like if someone is really sort of interested in understanding more about sort of how as an indie game developer I should approach it, like based on what you've seen in your community, what kind of tools should be looking at? And then also, this is the other thing, which is now that the tooling has become so easy, it's kind of reminiscent to me a little bit like, YouTuber and Instagrammers, right? Where suddenly everyone's a photographer. Everyone's
That's right.
a content creator of some form because they couldn't do that before, and now they can. And actually, their ability is to build brand and community, which is kind of what you're talking about. What does it mean for the game creators who maybe don't want to be brand builders, right? But they just want to make games, or do they just have to learn it and deal with that? That's kind of the one question. But then the second one is, what skills should they look at? What tools do you think they should be looking at? Just to get started.
Yeah, let's start with the tools question. The interesting thing about that is that, of course, there's a lot of tools you can use. You have Rosebud Versate that you can use that already have kind of templates that you can use. And I'm sure game engines like Unity are all coming up with AI.
Well, they said they are, but we're still waiting. Yeah.
Yeah. But the nice thing about it is that you can go straight to an LLM. You can talk to ChatGPT, talk to Claude and say, I want to make a game. And then one thing that Naval says about LLM is that it kind of meets you where you are. You don't have to be like super smart about LLMs to start talking to an LLM. So if you actually tell the LLM, I want to make a game, and then like ask me clarifying questions, like it actually helps you kind of figure out what kind of game you make. So a lot of people, I think they're afraid to get started because it's daunting or you don't want to look stupid in front of people. But you can start with like the dumbest question with the LLM, right? It's like, I don't know how to build a chair. Like, how do I get started building a chair? And it's the same with building a game. And that's how I actually started prototyping my game with, I was just using Claude Cowork actually. Not even Claude Code. So it wasn't like I was using the kind of game dev teams I've worked with. Of course, I know how game design works. I know how systems work. But I was like, okay, I want to make a prototype for this kind of game. How do I get started? And then it asks me questions. And then we started building a game design doc together. And then we started building a web prototype together. And it was such a fun journey.
I mean, I think in AI, there's no dumb questions because it's just with you and them, right? So you can do whatever you want there. That's kind of cool. But I think when it comes to sort of building out the experience here, like so many people build on Minecraft and build on Roblox, and the building of the game is maybe more fun than perhaps the game itself. Is that where you think it might be going? That's kind of one element. And I guess maybe for those of you who vibe code, as a general question, how many of you have vibe coded endlessly but never published anything? Right? Yeah. But was it fun? Right? I mean, I think the point is that the idea, the concept of creation, should we think of it as like the new kind of drawing or something where
yeah. I was talking about vibe coding as the new carpentry. Right. You could definitely make something just for yourself. You can make something that is shippable, but most of it will not have commercial value. For something that you vibe coded to have commercial value, I mean, there is kind of an extra layer of, does it have product market fit? Will it catch an audience, etc.? So the supply side is, growing and growing to infinite. I think that the demand side is still, it's still not easy, especially with endless distractions. Or instead of me paying for a game, I can actually just code my little mini games. So the things that you can do now is basically infinite. And I think the bar for actual products that someone else is willing to pay for is just getting higher.
So in the future, I think we established in the talk I just did before that we'll probably have tens of billions of agents. And we've seen things like Moltbook, which is obviously a first iteration of that. Not a game per se, but like a social network where agents interact. Lots of hallucinations, a lot of weird stuff going on, but generation one. Is it fair to say that there is a market where we should consider making games for agents? Right? That's kind of what, right? And so, because a lot of the companies that are being funded right now are actually funding an agent economy, right? It's like an email service for agents, a development platform for agents, right? It's not really, yes, the human is a driver for the need, but the agent is actually kind of like the purpose of it. It's almost like the customer. Do you think we're getting to that point?
So very good question. I have a couple of thoughts on this. One is that I saw someone on X say that, the next GameFi boom will be driven by agents. It's going to be much larger than play to earn. And if you take that tweet on its surface, I find it pretty stupid for the specific reason that the agents don't have fun, right? And you can codify what fun means for an agent, but essentially, if you deploy an agent, especially in Web3, and ask it to make money, it doesn't care if it's going in a game, DeFi, or MEV or whatever, it'll find the most efficient way to make money. So, quote unquote, fun is not a goal of an agent itself, unless you program it to, right? So, humans still like to have fun. So in that case, I think a game that is fun for people is still important. Having said that, what are the ways where agents can make the experience better for humans? I think that is the more interesting question. I'm not really inspired by the idea of making a game that just agents will play, right?
I think, when you think about one of the things that we were very bullish about, and it was just a cost issue, is around NPCs, right? So NPCs are, and so that's kind of one element. But how do you bring essentially NPCs properly to life? And with an AI, you can do that. And maybe there's games or game environments that could build around that. But the second thing that we've observed, at least with Animoca Minds, and I think it's happening with the Claw community as well, I'd love to hear your thoughts around basically parasocial relations with your agent.
Go on.
Right? So the construct would be that the first type of agents that people set up, maybe 2 or 3 months ago, were like calendar agent, QA agent,
the
coding
assistant,
agent,
right?
Right, standard. But what we've now seen is that the next wave of them have first names, or they have names based on maybe celebrities, or names based on things that matter, right? And I started doing something similar as well, where my coder is called Babaj, and Ada Lovelace, and whatever, those type of names that I have an association with, and then you actually start building a kind of context and relationship with the AI agent that is beyond purely its capability, its utility. And I think we see this with, celebrity crushes. We see this with, we're in Korea, BTS, whatever, right? But also with NPC characters in games, right? Those parasocial relations become real. And I don't mean like Hatsune Miku sort of style per se, which is intentional. It's unintentional. But because I poured 40 or 50 or 80 hours of game time in the game, and I interact with that character, even though the character is a dumb AI, there's nothing to go where. Do you think, and speaking of the human experience, right? Do you think that's going to be a content in itself? Is that valuable? Should we be concerned? What does it open up in your mind?
Very good question. So a lot of what's happening right now with agents is around memory and personality, right? So I think there is this kind of natural tendency of humans to want to interact with, either people or agents that have that kind of memory and personality. So I find that very interesting. I think using that NPC analogy and basically taking it outside of the game and into just the agentic web is, I think, something that a lot of people are really exploring right now. I think it makes agents more, I would say, more usable to humans. I would say if your coding agent has a different personality than your travel booking agent, than your assistant agent. You've compared Animoca Minds to an MMO. How are you thinking about it?
Well, I think the one thing that's really interesting is that Animoca Minds is built like a swarm. And so basically, every person who signs up with an agent, which is easy to do, just do it over email, actually you can give it a personality, but it can do your calendar. People are using it for sales leads. People are making money on it. That kind of stuff. It's like a claw, but they share skills with each other, and then the bazaar allows them to exchange value. And so you're actually really, if you think about it, my mental model is a little bit like Second Life, but maybe Third Life, right? In the sense that it's basically the better version of Second Life, because in Second Life you only made money or had value inside Second Life, but in this environment,
It's like Second Life for your real world environment,
yeah,
in a way.
exactly, and it extends it and it goes beyond that, and then from there, because it can make a sales lead for you to generate stuff in the real world. Like for instance, one story I can share with there's an artist who came. He wants to share it publicly later, so I won't name his name, but it's just a cool story. He used Minds, and he came to Hong Kong for Art Basel a couple of weeks ago, and he's a digital artist. And the Mind told him, because it's an agent, so it's constantly looking for opportunities. It knows, and with the personalization stuff is pretty cool. It's like, oh, the kind of person who wants to buy your art is going to be in this gallery on this day when you land at 7 p.m. You should be there. And he's like, I just landed like at 4 p.m. Do you want to go? He went, and he sold 125,000 US dollars worth of art the night after. And it just shows, like, you can't do this with Claude. You can't do this with Perplexity, because they will just tell you and answer you what you need, whereas they're constantly thinking about what you want to do, right? And speaking of the parasocial, one of the things that I have one coder, his name is Hero, the protagonist, as in Snow Crash, right? And the experience I had there was interesting. It's not that he's the best coder, but because I've been coding with him for the last 2 months, really, vibe coding together with other tools, this agent knows everything about what I prefer. Nothing what I'm good at, what I prefer. And now, I'm no longer creating a new coding agent, I'm having him clone himself. And so basically, this agent basically is like giving birth to itself, right? And it retains some of the qualities that come from there. And I find there's an evolution that happens. And as you're using agents, I find it's always so surprising, the things that it can do. What are some of the surprising things that I think you found that when you're coding that it could do? Because I find there's so many magical moments when you're sort of coding, vibe coding as it were.
So my vibe coding, I think what's been interesting about it is that it can think of things that you haven't thought of. One of the things that I've done is, for example, I was vibe coding a game that would make myself healthier, because as I shared with some of my friends, I'm using Claude to build like a personalized health dashboard for myself. So it takes data from my Oura-ring, 8 sleep, all of my food, I do my meal tracking, and I have a functional health system for myself, and I wanted to gamify that. And then it went out and helped me basically do a like market research. What are the gamified health apps? How big is this market? What is the TAM, the SAM, and all of that? And like, what approach could I do so that it could make an app that would make $1 million a year? So that was really interesting, and it actually led me down thinking of, can I take this all the way and make it a 0-person company that would create a product, ship it, and basically do it in my spare time while I'm running a company myself, right?
It's SimCity but real, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Or like The Sims but in real life, and maybe this is the moment that we're approaching. So I know we're coming to the end of the talk. Maybe final thoughts around your view.
Is Web3 gaming dead?
Nah, no. We don't have to go there. By the way, I disagree with everyone who says Web3 gaming is dead. Come meet us outside. We'll go in for a little boxing fight. And it's adjacent to this, which is how do you, I shared my views earlier, but how do you think of crypto and blockchain playing a part in this? Obviously, we're bullish, but how do you see this with, not just with vibe coding, but with the users? Because obviously, crypto has had a little bit of a wintry experience, shall we say. But where do you see that as some closing thoughts?
I feel like the crypto and AI are kind of the yin and yang for each other. Crypto by itself, we've seen what's happened in the last few years. The crypto by itself has failed to reach mass adoption in the same way that AI has with ChatGPT and the others in the last few years. But we're now seeing, and I think there's a strong conviction with a lot of people within crypto that crypto and AI need each other. I told Yat I'm always on the side of humans, always have been since we started YDG, and even now with crypto, with AI and gaming, it's still how can the human benefit, how can the creator benefit, and so I think that for crypto like and AI, they just make each other better and more useful for the human being.
Well, with that, thank you so much.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening, and give it up for Gabby. Thank you.